Thank you, everyone, for making it out here on this wonderful Thursday morning for a climate change forum with our gubernatorial candidates here. And before we get started, I really want to give a very sincere thank you to all of the Environment Council of Rhode Island volunteers and the ecoRI volunteers and staff for pulling this together over the last couple of months. And just to make sure that everybody knows who put their time and effort into this, Topher Hamlet from Save the Bay has been a very big partner for us. We've got Chip Young and Frank Carini from ecoRI, Greg Garrett, who makes everything from in the Environment Council move overall. And we also had Lauren Carson and Trish Yadley from Conservation Law Foundation, and Lauren Carson and myself from Clean Water Action, really putting this on today. So, as I should have started with, my name is Jamie Rhodes. I'm the president of the Environment Council of Rhode Island and also the director of Clean Water Action here. So before we get into things, and we're going to move pretty quickly here because we only have a limited amount of time, and I want to be respectful of that. Each candidate will have an opportunity to provide their statements. The order was determined randomly at a drawing, as was happened right here before everyone was seated. And that order is going to be Clay Pell, Gina Raimondo, Todd Giroux, and then Angel Tavares in that order. And when we invited them to be part of this forum, we asked them two questions that we wanted them to cover in their remarks, make sure that we narrow down as much as we can. The first question is, what role does the governor's office play in responding to threats and opportunities of climate change? The second question is, if you were the next governor, what priority would you give to responding to these threats and capitalize on these opportunities? So we hope that their remarks kind of fit into that mold, and after each candidate gives their remarks, we've got Frank Carini. He's going to be our moderator from ecoRI, asking up to 2 follow-up questions just to make sure they stayed on topic for us. And then if we're able to stay within our time limits and we have a couple of extra minutes at the end, we've got 1 or 2 questions that we hope to have the opportunity to answer each person on the panel here, kind of as our farewell for this.
About several weeks ago, the candidates received a packet of information about climate change. And now each one of them will have 5 to 7 minutes to respond to the 2 questions that Jamie mentioned earlier in this program. After each one of the candidates completes their answer, I'll ask 1 or 2 follow-up questions. And if after they've all spoken and time permits, we'll move on to Final Jeopardy, which would be one last panel question for each one of them. The question would be the same. I'll keep that to myself until the end. But anyway, we have an order which was drawn out of this ancient piece of Tupperware earlier, and it's Mr. Pell, Treasurer Raimondo, Mr. Giroux, and then Mayor Tavares. So the floor is yours, Mr. Pell.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the Environmental Council of Rhode Island and to all of you for being here. And I want to answer the question very directly. Absolutely, the governor plays an essential role, and I intend to lead this state and make this state a real model for our efforts to combat climate change. And I want to, this morning, just take a couple of minutes to lay out why and how I'm going to go about doing that. And one of the first reasons why, I think Professor King alluded to obliquely, but I want to make it very clear, and that is that science is under assault right now in America. Republicans at the national level, and apparently also at the local level, don't accept that global climate change is a challenge. I think that's why we know that they aren't here this morning. Their party platform is driven by politics. The Republican Party's patrons are big oil companies, big coal companies, and they rely on carbon-emitting fuels for maximum profits. And as long as the Republican Party is standing in the way of the leadership of Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island, President Obama, and others in Washington, it is absolutely essential that we have a governor here in Rhode Island who is leading the way, and I want to be that leader for you. It's something that I saw as a member of the Coast Guard, where I witnessed how our nation is an international leader in crisis response, in disaster recovery, and in resiliency. And I really don't think that there is a decision point between the environment and the economy. I think that Rhode Island's natural strengths position us, if we choose, to be a national leader in the industry that will respond to climate change. I don't think that this is something that should be just one specific policy, an environmental policy. I think that this is about how we approach problems. It should be part of our economic approaches, part of our infrastructure approaches, part of everything we do. And yesterday, when I released my economic plan, I talked about, in specific terms, how we can leverage our natural environment, including our growing local agricultural sector, which was one of the few areas to grow during the recession, to returning our focus in the ocean state to the ocean and to the maritime trades that surround us. The bottom line is that when I'm governor, I'm going to work to make Rhode Island the national center for innovation in the green economy and disaster resiliency. I intend to do that by directing the Rhode Island Department of Transportation to develop a green infrastructure program for state work projects and to support current DEM efforts to encourage low-impact design techniques for stormwater management. As governor, I will direct DOT and DEM to implement the green infrastructure program for state public works. I will promote municipal efforts to adopt green infrastructure. And across the board, I will champion climate change adaptation efforts. But the bottom line also is that I don't think that it's all about creating entirely new proposals. I think there are a lot of really great things that are happening. And a lot of the people who are leading those efforts are in this room right now. And I want to partner with you to build on some of the great ideas that we already have, to capitalize on existing funding sources, such as the Regional Gas House Initiative, such as the Renewable Energy Fund. And I want to lay out some very specific things that I absolutely will do as governor. Number one, I will implement Executive Order 1401, establishing the Rhode Island Climate Change Council. Number two, I will support and lead initiatives such as the Beach Special Area Management Program, the SAMP, to provide science-backed policies and planning tools to improve the state's resilience. Number three, I will protect the strong legal foundation for the state's energy programs. These include the Rhode Island Energy Resources Act, the Distributed Generation Program, the Renewable Energy Standard, and long-term contracting. Number four, I will support the ongoing efforts of so many agencies, many of whom are represented here today, including the Rhode Island Public Energy Partnership, ecoRI, which I think needs to continue to move in this direction, Energy Efficiency and Resources Management Council, and the Renewable Energy Coordinating Board. Number five, I will support the Rhode Island Public Energy Partnership and implement what we need to do is implement energy efficiency measures in approximately 100 facilities to attain an average of a 20% energy reduction. I will lead this implementation of the state energy plan, and I will do something which I believe that has already been called for but has not yet been done. I will direct the Office of Energy Resources to establish an energy rating and labeling program for existing buildings in Rhode Island to increase investments in energy efficiency. And number eight, I encourage all of us in this room to strongly support the Clean Water, Open Space, and Healthy Communities bond question number 4 on the November 2014 ballot. But the bottom line is that to do any of these things, whether it's changing how we approach including the environment in our state planning, or other core issues that I know we all care deeply about, like raising the minimum wage and pay equity for all people in the state, education and infrastructure. If we want to do any of those things, we have to change how government works in this state. For too long, it has been about who you know rather than what you know. For too long, people see politics as usual and cynicism. For too long, people have felt have not been part of the process. And that's why I've taken a pledge not to accept contributions from PACs or from state lobbyists. It's why, to promote transparency, I've disclosed 5 years of tax returns to the Providence Journal. It's why I'm calling on the General Assembly to have oversight, to be overseen by the Ethics Commission. Across all of these things, that's the type of change that we need if we're going to really make the environmental changes that we have to in this state. So for those reasons, I ask for your support, and I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Mr. Pell. You mentioned in your answer about the state's agricultural sector, and it is growing, but still only about 1% to 2% of the food consumed in Rhode Island is actually produced or grown here. So what would you do to better support local food production in Rhode Island?
Absolutely. there are a couple of things that I will do. Number one, we have a great community of farmers markets in this state, and many of them are sourced by local agricultural sources, aquaculture and agriculture. I want to make our farmers markets, all of our farmers markets across the state accessible to SNAP benefits. Number two, I want to make sure that when the state is purchasing foods, that we have a threshold that is being purchased locally. We don't currently have a threshold. There are discussions about doing this. I know that we've recently entered into a new contract, but I absolutely support setting a clear threshold of up to 30% of agricultural products that we would begin buying from our local producers. And then it's about incorporating our agricultural sector into the economic development of the state. I think we've seen incredible work by the state's nurseries and landscapers to really start talking about how they can be part of the resilient economy, how they can be part of designing our built environment in the state. I think if we bring people together to tackle these cross-cutting issues that often fall between the seams of the silos of government and organizations, that we will really be able to make a change and support our local agriculture.
Another question, you had mentioned how difficult it will be, the political will to get stuff done. If you were governor, how would, to deal with climate change, how would you require municipalities to make harder decisions, like i.e. retreat from the coast, or what kind of stick and carrot methods would you use to get them to make hard decisions? It's not going to be easy.
Well, all of our future is in this together. And I think we actually already see, for example, the city of Newport really leading the way and talking about how they're going to invest in this. It's about bringing people together, including the Navy and the federal government, the resources of the Department of Homeland Security, as well as the local governments, as well as the state government. It's, like you said, it's not going to be easy. But if we align the resources of the multiple levels of government, federal, state, local, so that we have sticks and carrots, we actually can get there. And that's the type of experience that I bring from my time in Washington to work across all these different partners to move it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Pell.
It's terrific to be here on such an important topic. And it's great, I love the format that we can actually have a meaty discussion because this is an important issue. Before I dive into some of my ideas and a discussion of what the governor's role is, I want to tell you a little bit about who I am because that drives so much of my commitment to this issue, which is to say, I grew up here and have spent my entire life, literally, going to the same spot of the same beach every summer, which is Sand Hill Cove Beach in Narragansett. And when I married my husband, who's from Michigan, I said, we have to move back to Rhode Island because I need to be near the beach, I need to be near the bay, I need to be able to take our kids quail hogging in Salt Pond and go kayaking. And he didn't quite understand it, but now after living here for 12 years, he gets it. It's a part of who I am. My children, we go there every weekend. On any given weekend, you'll find them in Salt Pond clamming or kayaking. And I mention that because on a very personal level, this is a real threat. I cannot imagine, you listen here and you talk about, the threat to our coastline and the threat to our beaches. It's part of who we are as Rhode Islanders at a very deep level. And so for that reason, among other reasons, we have a special responsibility to attack this problem, with real urgency. And as I think about my kids or my grandkids not being able to enjoy the bay or the beaches in the same way that I did, that's all the motivation you need to take this problem seriously. And then when you think about what you were saying about the temperature rises, can you imagine, the predictions are that by the end of the century, we're going to have a climate like Virginia or South Carolina. I mean, that's scary. So the governor absolutely has a role to put, no disrespect to Virginia or South Carolina, but that's not, someone up here is like, Virginia's a nice place. I understand that, but that's not the way it's supposed to be, in Rhode Island. And then something we haven't yet touched on, the disease. I had a daughter with Lyme disease a few years ago. West Nile virus, the contaminants. It's like someone said, we pay now or we pay later. Let's get ready now. These consequences are inevitable and avoidable. So that's a little bit of context for how I would approach these dual challenges of mitigation and adaptation. I will say that all of the work I've done as treasurer, particularly around the pension work, has been focused on this issue of sustainability. When I came into office, I inherited a pension crisis. I inherited a pension program that was the worst funded in the country, and we were being told if we didn't do something, it wasn't sustainable. And it's very similar because we talk about the long-term aspects here. The pension wasn't going to run out of money in a year or two. The cost probably wasn't going to bankrupt a city or town in a year or two. But inevitably, in 10 or 20 years, if we didn't fix it, cities or towns would have gone bankrupt. Inevitably, in 20 years or more, it would have run out of money and people wouldn't have had pensions. So we had to take on a challenge, be realistic about its magnitude, and be brave. Some of the topics that have come up today, and it was all about sustainability. And so that approach of being brave, being realistic, tackling the challenge, and moving for big solutions is the approach that I will take as governor to address these issues of climate change. I think the approach that the governor has to take has to be one of leadership, one of making it crystal clear that this state is committed to these issues, and one of a plan that simultaneously deals with adaptation and mitigation, or mitigation and adaptation. And all of this against a background of being in the state with the highest unemployment rate in the country, and really looking for, we talk about the challenges, but the opportunity is the job creation. I think my overall approach is this isn't a checklist, right? This isn't a checklist. The governor's job is to make sure that every decision we make is made with the lens of how is this going to affect and improve climate change. Which is to say, when we build our infrastructure, we're building a bridge, let's be real. The river water level is going to be higher in 10 or 20 years. Let's take that into effect. When we're rebuilding our schools, let's be realistic. Air quality is going down, let's take that into account. It has to inform our overall approach if we're going to be successful, and the same with the economy. With respect to mitigation, I am and will be committed to the distributed generation program. It's excellent. I'm proud of Rhode Island. Let's extend it and keep it going. Same thing with Reggie. I'm proud of Rhode Island. Let's not be New Jersey. Let's not get weak and pull out. Let's stay in it and keep it going and expand it because it's doing good work. I've also, with respect to mitigation, called for the creation of a green bank, and happy to talk more about that. That's a good way to consolidate some of the great work that's going on and also attract private capital. This is an opportunity to much of what we've done already in Rhode Island, the Renewable Energy Fund, really needs to be expanded and scaled. And I think if we have a green bank, which is a clean finance authority, it will allow us, number one, to show our leadership, number two, attract private capital, and number three, this could be the way we get at the wholesale retrofitting that Tim was talking about. With respect to adaptation, we have to get serious. I agree that we need a statewide plan. I agree that we need to put pressure on municipalities. I'd like to see the state create an adaptation and resiliency revolving fund. This stuff works. Look at Bristol. Bristol invested in a stormwater treatment plant. Bristol did not have a single beach closing last year. The state of Rhode Island had twice as many beach closings last year as the year before. So let's put a revolving loan fund in place to allow municipalities access to capital so they can appropriately
Treasurer Raimondo, I'm
treat
going to have to, your time
their
has been.
stormwater. Yes, I'm sorry about that.
That's
we
all
were
right.
told ahead of time we had 10 minutes. But so just to quickly sum up, I think that we need greater coordination, we need to provide capital available to municipalities, and most of all, we need a governor who's a leader, who has the courage to take on the issue and give it the attention that it's due. Thank you.
Well, you meant, you mentioned how the state needs to show that it's committed to dealing with this major issue. What would you do to show that it is committed? What would you do to show the State House that you're committed, if you were governor, to addressing this issue? What were some of the first steps?
Well, again, I think the state should create a green bank. Look at Connecticut. New governor came in. He hired Dan Esty. He said, let's have a green bank. Within less than 2 years, they have a $100 million green bank, and they're known for their activities around this. That can be Rhode Island. Let's stay the course on distributed generation. Let's stay the course on the RGGI program. Let's reach out to our cities and towns to make sure that they have plans in place. You know, I think Wickford has they've started to put a plan in place for the next storm. You know, let's get ready. Like Tim said, we have these coastal areas. We should have a statewide plan. 400 miles of coastline, we're uniquely vulnerable. So, you know, let's get to work and put a plan in place so that the next time a storm comes, we can react quickly with respect to what has to happen after the storm.
In the green bank, could you briefly just, for the people like myself, the layman doesn't really understand what the green bank is, and also would the green bank include divesting from fossil fuels?
Well,
Or would that be part of a green bank structure?
The green bank, what it would do is it would be a quasi-public agency, similar to Clean Water Finance Authority. It would have bonding authority, and its sole mission would be to deal with issues of climate change and energy efficiency. So it would be a way to consolidate resources and talent and financing for the state. So right now we have a renewable energy fund. Let's put it in the green bank and let's expand it. $11 million is a good start. Let's make it bigger. Energy efficiency. Energy efficiency, there's a great deal of private capital available for energy efficiency retrofitting, for school buildings, for housing, for commercial buildings. If we had a green bank and an expert running it, that person's job would be able to attract that kind of private capital so that we could do these retrofits. That's been happening in other cities and states. We should do that here. Prior to becoming treasurer, I was involved in starting and funding a company called Nexamp. You know, Nexamp is a private company, and they do solar installations. In fact, I was at Quonset yesterday visiting. They have one of the most powerful rooftop solar arrays in the country, and it's in Quonset by this company, Nexamp. That's a company that is funded with private capital. Green Bank might consider working with a company like that so they could expand in Rhode Island. By the way, since 2006, that company has created over 100 jobs. So again, the silver lining of all of this is, let's get Rhode Island ready to face climate change, and let's put people to work in the process.
What about the divesting part with that? I mean, if you're going to be committed, that's a huge step by saying we're going to divest from fossil fuels, which are the biggest problem, as Professor King mentioned, the power plants. Would that be one way that part of the green bank idea or part of?
I think that is a good idea, but that would be a separate. This is a bank which is like I said, similar to the Clean Water Finance Authority. This is not investing in, certainly would not invest in fossil fuel companies. This would be an opportunity to make capital available, bonding capital, public capital, private capital, to invest in green technology, alternative energy, energy efficiency.
Okay, so a separate issue then, I guess I'm going to.
A separate issue, I think
of divesting, is that something that we have to start thinking
Yes,
about? I know
absolutely.
URI and Brown students have put pressure on it, but the universities did not.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. In fact, as treasurer, one of the things I've done that I'm proud of is we administer the defined contribution portion of the state retirement system through TIAA-CREF. And as a treasurer, I went to TIAA-CREF and said, we need to start providing sustainable investment options for people. And we did that. And we're one of the few states in the country that have done that. So absolutely.
Thank you for this opportunity to the to the Environment Council of Rhode Island. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to discuss with you and listen to the concerns and explain my vision for the environment protections and how that fits and starts with economic progress in Rhode Island. Economic security has many faces: jobs, housing, lower taxes. Today and every day we focus on clean, renewable energy, water, and a food chain free from pesticide. These are the environment conditions people want for their families and for the future generations, and is my focus and why I'm running for governor of Rhode Island, as I intend to win this Democratic primary. I fight for these basic of human conditions and fair rules of the road, so there is a penalty for politicians playing politics with economic conditions, consumer spending, jobs, and the welfare of people regarding environmental protections and national security. Reducing CO2, clean food and water, and attracting new business to Rhode Island. Retaining our best and brightest has been on the top of all our agenda for many years now, but has had little satisfactory progress and action due to many in elected office politicizing and using that power competing to play politics with schools, pools, pensions, and illusions that political dynasty aligned with Wall Street and an old boy network and money can solve our problems. This divide is putting us at risk in our communities and our businesses, our families, and leading to greater political instability. Continued 9% unemployment. Glad to hear it's dipping down a bit, but we all know that there's many underemployed people here in Rhode Island. This is restricting all our ability to focus on investment in Rhode Island to grow our economy and bridge a skills gap. I fear that protections for the environment will fall by the wayside if we fail to take an organic look at our politics and leaders. Remember when acid rain was an alarming finding just 20 years ago, and now we're faced with issues to remain vigilant on LNG, so there's no pipeline in our bay, oil spills, Alaska, Gulf of Mexico, the Louisiana Delta, antibiotics in our water supplies, organics, rainwater runoff, PCBs, radiation, Fukushima, it's all around us. Rhode Island is looking for a new executive officer. Will that be someone who is known to negotiate away our freedoms, our pensions and protections earned in your lifetime, telling you that everything is a #1 priority, or someone aligned with other ways of old money politicizing issues with a bought and paid for agenda? I am the homegrown organic candidate. I'm not afraid to stand up to the political machine. I was not born and bred into it. I've watched our state sink further into decline in jobs and economy, and I don't want to see the environment progress slip backwards due to corporate takeover in America. I'm the only candidate leading the conversation of economic recovery to a jobs plan and a way to pay for it. When you hear other candidates talk about revolving funds, and yet on the other hand you say I'm a minor candidate in this race, I have driven this point home for revolving funds in Rhode Island. I am paving a way for $1 billion of investment in Rhode Island. Every candidate in this race is now talking about revolving funds, green banks, and a way to pay for it. I'm in construction. I understand jobs, labor, and I understand there needs to be a way to pay for it. Homeowners are in desperate need of these vital repairs for energy efficiency. Let me give you an example. How to make an effective change now today. We have 3 4-family houses here in the state. They each have, there's 4 heating systems in the basement of a home. How come there can't be one furnace that distributes and meters all that generation of CO2? How come there can't be one piece of equipment that meters and provides heat to that home? Why do we need 4 furnaces per every piece of property, in an urban area? It's unnecessary. Alongside with that, how come we can't have utilizing boat technology, hydronic systems? How come we can't have a little furnace this big, pumping the heat through the home in the spring and the fall? I understand we need high BTU systems in the middle of the cold winter, but in the spring and fall, there's got to be a way to create energy-efficient ways of moving the heat through the home, and I think we should utilize all available technology to do that. As governor, it's my #1 concern. When I was a kid in college, I used to say, geez, why are we throwing all this into the landfill? Why can't we reclaim it somehow? And now this new technology of thermal depolymerization, I want to bring that to the landfill. Our landfill phase 1 is within, quarter mile of a Superfund site. It's endangering our drinking water. We need a better way. We cannot just keep piling the trash up higher and higher and covering it over. It doesn't work. So again, I say Rhode Island's looking for a new executive officer. Is that going to be someone who negotiates away all our freedoms and pensions and protections that we've earned? I don't see it that way. My family was born here, I was born here, and my family before them. Our history is strong with resistance to not be told what to do, how, and when. Think for yourselves and join me in this fight to protect people in our environment. As governor, I know advocacy and actionable defense of our environment, standing up to corporate influence and protecting our bay is the most important resource for future generations. I have a boat, and I've traveled Lake Michigan. It's a beautiful and clean place. But you go to a town like Alpena, Michigan. Sorry, world, Alpena, Michigan's on the spotlight now. But you bring your boat into that harbor, and the water is gray, it's gross. You know, it's just offensive when you have that level of industry. So our partners in industry need to be part of the solution. There's scrubber technology out there. It's available, and it needs to be implemented. We need an army of folks concerned about this and bringing it to the neighborhoods of our state. And, you know, it doesn't take a 4-year degree to bring awareness to this issue and work in that industry. So I believe that we need a leader to stand up to that industry and corporate influence to bring home those dollars to Rhode Island. Remember this from driver's ed? 300 gallons of air to burn 1 gallon of gas. That's real. And so every nuclear test, everything that drives, you know, look, we've done the research. Why do countries have to continue to test these things? We're burning up our oxygen. It's leading to deforestation. So that's what I talk about, and I talk about bringing home a revolving fund for this so that we don't have to create new bonds, so that we can offer low-interest ways of paying for these jobs and infrastructure programs.
Thank you, Mr. Giroux.
Thank you.
You mentioned energy efficiency in buildings and so forth. How would you initiate such a program? You have to deal with landlords, private homeowners, businesses. How would you get such a program off the ground? Or incorporate all those different interests? Right.
Well, I think that we continue to be at the crossroads of investment. We know that our housing needs to be continually updated for efficiency. I think it's really going to develop with support from the community, a groundswell of support. Tenants are paying higher rents than they need to. The heat is going out the window. We are, you know, this whole forum is about bringing awareness to what is sustainable and where we're going to be. My #1 focus is to bring a commerce fund to Rhode Island so that people can have these, you know, energy efficiencies. It's good for the property owner. It's good for the tenants. It's good for the community. And all that laddering is going to bring a beneficial, you know, point to a state. I'm all in. This is everything I'm about, is bringing a jobs and work program to the state. Focusing it on these energy efficiency ways is the most important thing that we can focus on. Nothing 2 years down the road. I want this to happen in 2015.
Mayor Tavares. Thank you, Mr. Giroux.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for putting on this forum. You had 2 questions for us. One is the role the governor plays in responding to threats of climate change and capitalizing on opportunities. The second is if you're the next governor, what priority would you give to responding to those threats and opportunity? I want to address both questions, and I think for me, as mayor, I have a record that I think you can judge me on in terms of the priority that I give to these issues, actions that I've taken, and I think that'll give you a sense as to the priority I will give to them as governor. Let me just say, as mayor, when I was first elected, I had a group of the state's leading environmentalists, including several of whom are here today, who were part of the transition team. And what we did was put together the top 9 environmental priorities for my administration. And we've made progress on all of them. I want to talk to you briefly about them, and then I want to talk to you about what I'd like to do as governor. One of the things that we did, number one on the list, was creating an Office of Sustainability. And in the most difficult economic situation that the city has faced, certainly probably in my lifetime, I was able to do that. I did it because I knew it was important for the future of our city and the future of our state. And my director of sustainability is here, Sheila Dormady, who I named to lead those efforts, and I appreciate the great work she's done. And with her work, we've also been able to hire 2 energy managers who've helped us in the city as well. We've developed a Sustainable Providence Plan to achieve goals for energy, food, water, waste, land use, and economic development and transportation. We've done that in the city of Providence. The second goal was promoting public transportation, something that is ongoing and we all need to commit ourselves to. But we have a bicycle and pedestrian advisory commission that has been formed, and we look forward to rolling out shortly we've released the Bike Providence Master Plan, but we're also doing a bike sharing program that we're going to have in the city, and I'm looking forward to doing that as well. And we've supported state legislation for stable transit funding. I'm proud of the fact that we've enforced the Lead Hazard Mitigation Act, which was our third goal. And we just saw recently that 24% drop in lead poisoning for our young kids, 24% drop in the city. And that is because of the efforts that we collectively have made to address this issue. We still have more to do, but we're going in the right direction. And I look forward to continuing to work on that as governor. We said we develop public use of the former shooter's site. That's ongoing. The shooter's site has been demolished, and we're working with the state on site development. But we will get there, and we will have public use there at the former shooter's site. We said we would implement remediation and maintenance and a maintenance plan for a Gorham manufacturing site. And we have signed a memorandum of understanding with Textron to detail remediation responsibilities and to restore the full site to allow future development of access, development of public access. And community stakeholder meetings are ongoing right now. We set a recycling goal of 50% by 2014, and we also want to promote composting projects. We're not at the 50% goal yet. We have more to do, but we're taking steps to make sure that that happens. We have the big green can recycling, which is something that I'm very proud of, but we have more to do to make sure that we have recycling done across the city, hence my question a little bit earlier to Professor Roberts. But we do have a pilot program for composting, and we've expanded it actually to include West Elmwood Housing and Smith Hill and the West Side. And we're also working on improving and implementing stormwater management strategies, something that is critical for the future of our cities and our state. We have created additional community gardens across the city, something that is important for urban agriculture and also, quite frankly, is good for the development of our neighborhoods. And we've promised to protect Providence water supply and Situate Reservoir as a public asset. And we've done that, and we'll continue to do that. So those are some of the things that we've done, and I just point out something that we talked about earlier, Professor Roberts talked about it, the trees that we have been involved in, and that started before me, and so I give credit to everyone who's been involved with that, but we're moving forward on that. The parking, the on-street parking that we've been able to do, and also the work on the Green and Healthy Housing Initiative. In terms of being governor, and what we could do. I just released my plan, Preserving Rhode Island. It's a 7-point plan to address sustainability statewide. And you can see it at angel2014.com. But let me talk to you about some specific ideas. First, I'd set Rhode Island on a path to require 40% of our electricity to come from clean, renewable energy by 2030. If we're going to reduce our carbon footprint, we have to make investments necessary to move away from fossil fuels. So that is something that I recognize how important it is. We need to invest in energy efficiency in wind power, solar power, geothermal power, hydroelectricity, and other sources of renewable energy. That is something we must do for the future of our state. Second, We need to get serious about creating a 21st century transportation system that provides a wide range of choices for all Rhode Islanders. I mentioned that as part of my plan in the city, and I'd say that we've made progress, but as a state, we need to make more progress on that. Third, we need a coordinated campaign for food and organic waste diversion. The central landfill is going to be full to capacity in 25 years if we don't take action. And as governor, I would produce an organic waste master plan that is modeled on what's been accomplished in Connecticut. And finally, I would direct all state agencies to work together in developing strategies to prepare for and address the impacts of climate change. And I support Representative Handy's Resilient Rhode Island Act, Resolution 7904. That I think is very, very important. Let me say this, because I see the time is winding down. I know we only have a couple of minutes. I think it's important that the next governor understand that this is a critical issue, and I do understand that. I think it's also important to understand that we have tremendous resources, many of whom are in this room right now, who can help you address it. That's what I did as mayor by putting together the best minds in our state, developing a plan to what we could do in the city, and then making sure that we executed that plan so that 4 years later, in the middle of some of the most difficult economic times that we face, we have seen progress on each of those 9 steps. As governor, I plan on doing the same exact thing, and that's bringing you together, developing a plan early on, and executing on that plan so that you can see the progress that we're making as a state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Ferraro. What would be the role of climate, since we had 2 scientists here earlier? What would be the role of climate science in your administration? Would you have advisors that are, versed in that sector?
Absolutely, and one of the things I mentioned at my closing is that when I brought together the leaders of so many of our state leaders for my transition as mayor, I realized that while I may not fully understand all of the different challenges, I've got people around me who absolutely do understand that. And what you do is you take them and you bring them together. You understand that they have an expertise that perhaps you don't. You listen and you learn. And then develop the plan and make sure it's executed. But ultimately, it's up to the chief executive. What I mean by that is the reason we have an Office of Sustainability is because the mayor of Providence decided that there would be an Office of Sustainability. And it was a priority. And when it's a priority, it happens. And so we're going to continue to do that as governor of the state of Rhode Island, is to make sure that it's a priority and people understand where it's coming from. It starts at the top.
Thank you. One question. We have time for Final Jeopardy, and we'll do the same order. And the question is, what does Rhode Island need to do to move forward on the issue of climate change, and how prepared are we? And Mr. Pell, we'll start with you.
Well, I think, as we've all talked about, we have to work together. I think that there have been important starts, including the executive order, but what we need to do now is actually exert leadership, show that it's top priority, and beginning in day 1 in office, use the executive authority of the governor to go through and say, we are going to start purchasing locally. We are going to work together with the Navy and with all of our public and private sectors to come up with a comprehensive approach to climate change, saying that we are going to actually really make this a center for the response to climate change. That this isn't just a cost, but this is actually the opportunity to grow. That this is something that the world is looking at, and that we actually have a chance, because of our natural resources, because of our geography, because of our sea, because of URI and Brown, because of the oceans and because of the Navy, to actually make this the model. That's what I'm going to do as governor.
Thank you. Treasurer Raimondo?
Thank you, and thank you again. I think we do have a lot to be proud of, and it is on account of the people in this room. We have a lot to be proud of. The distributed generation program is excellent. The fact that we're part of RGGI and see ourselves, we're all in it together in that program, we should be proud of. The Renewable Energy Fund, something to be proud of. the fact that you're all here, and we have some of the greatest experts in the country committed to it. So, with respect to your question of how are we doing, I think the answer is, we're doing quite well, but we have to take it to the next level. And it's the governor's job to lead. As I said, it's not just a checklist. It's not as simple as saying, I'm going to do these 5 things. It's a new approach to a new reality. Climate change, mitigation of emissions, mitigation as well as adaptation, needs to inform all of our decisions, our infrastructure decisions, our town planning decisions, our financing decisions. And that is a governor's job. A governor's job is to be committed to it, to lead. This won't be easy. There are climate change deniers. It is a fact. We have to confront that and not let them win. We have to lead on this. And that means when it says, let's invest in renewable energy, let's find capital to retrofit buildings. Every day I drive to work in the State House. Across the street from the State House, I look across the street, there's a state building, and out of almost every window is an air conditioning unit. As your governor, I find that unacceptable, and I will fix that because there's capital available to do retrofitting. Let's put people to work doing that retrofitting. Let's bring down our energy costs, and let's let Rhode Island lead. And that won't be easy. People will say don't spend the money. People will say there's other priorities. And that's where the governor needs to step up and say, this is the ocean state. This is unacceptable. We want innovation here. And we want our children to be able to love the beaches and the air and Rhode Island the same way that we did. And so I think the governor can't do enough on the issue. And I look forward to working with every one of you and listening to you to continue and expand upon and consolidate and coordinate the great work that you've already begun. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Raimondo. Mr. Giroux?
Hi there. Hello. Hi. We've all heard about nature versus nurture. Why don't we nurture our nature? Big point. I grew up in North Smithfield. There's stories where farmers would accept cash to bury chemicals. We have high incidence of stomach cancers and polyps and things like that. Woonasquatucket River dioxin was identified in '96. PCBs, all these things. If I bring my boat up to the Providence River inside the hurricane barrier, you leave a boat there for a couple of months, and what you'll find is a very unique type of oyster shell that grows on the bottom of a boat. I describe it as somewhere between an oyster shell and black mold. Okay, it's unbelievable to see in the summer in that Providence Basin there. If you're on a boat, it's like a scuba diver is under your boat. The soil just boils. The bubbles come up out of the surface. People don't know about these things. I'm in construction. I've had our scaffolding in the bay on the East Providence River. You pull scaffolding that's settled into the sediment and pull it out, and the silt, the smell is unbelievable. You get that on your shoes, it stinks. You want to just throw anything you were wearing that day away. I want to focus on cleanup here in the state. I want to continue to discover the Superfund sites and go after them. I want thermal depolymerization units in municipalities. I want them at the landfill. That is fuel that can be used as we transition out of fossil fuels. That's fuel that we can use for our schools. These huge buildings cost $20,000, $30,000 a month. Even some residential size homes that are turned into commercial. It costs huge amounts of money to transition these buildings from these old heating systems into new. So everything that I talk about is about creating a jobs plan that's paid for by a commerce fund. You call them commerce infrastructure funds. We can divest in an all Wall Street portfolio as immediate action to bring this funding to the state. We can petition the U.S. government for the 2008 Economic Stabilization Act. Rhode Island needs help, and I am part of the conversation to drive this Commerce Fund to a jobs plan. That's what I'm focused on. I hope you all understand that throughout the year as this primary defines who and what the candidates are about. But I'm here to stand up to those industries who want to pollute here, okay? And I want to bring help to the people of Rhode Island and create that jobs plan in reality in 2015. Season after season goes by when people are underemployed, the buildings have fallen apart. We absolutely need to act, and as in my experience in construction, understanding the players in the field, it just takes a reserve pool of money to fund that jobs plan. That's what I'm about.
Thank you, Mr. Drew.
Thank you.
Mayor Tavares?
Thank you. You asked what does Rhode Island need to do to move forward and how prepared are we? Let me just say I think we need to do 3 things. One is we need to educate. We need to educate our leaders, and I would say that with this presentation that we had today, we should have with the League of Cities and Towns and all of our municipal leaders so that they can understand some of the basic things that we can do at the city level to help make a difference, and they can also understand how important it is. We need to educate the community so that we can create a sense of urgency. So I think that's the very first thing we need to do is educate. I think the second thing we need to do is develop a plan. And I have one in Preserving Rhode Island, and I know that we have great members of the General Assembly who are working right now as well to pass legislation, as I mentioned Representative Handy in his act as well. We need a plan, and I have one to move us forward. The third thing we need to do is execute. We create the sense of urgency and educate our community and our leaders. Make sure that we have a plan. The third is execute that plan. That's what I've done as mayor of the city of Providence. That's what I'll do as governor of the state of Rhode Island. This presentation today, I think, was important for all of us as candidates. I think it's important, though, that this presentation be made really outside of this classroom, that it be made across community centers across our state, that it be made in churches, that it be made in other languages, that people start understanding the challenges that we're facing, and that if we don't do something now, we're going to face even a worse situation down the road. So I look forward to working with you to educate our community, to develop our plan, and to execute on that plan, and to making sure to preserve all that is wonderful about our great state. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you all very much. I know we have hit our time and even stole you guys for 5 minutes extra, so I appreciate your flexibility here. So once again, a big round of applause for our candidates, and thank you all for coming today.